So one of the things I kind of neglected to mention about the sailing trip I had here a couple of weeks back, obviously we had discussed kind of the absence of other boats out there, but there was a notable exception. Certainly a couple, perhaps three really, really large, kind of ridiculous yachts. I mean, big stuff, excess of 100 feet, 4 or 5 decks, that kind of thing. And they prowl around here. This is bad country for those kinds of boats. A lot of times the anchorages are really on the smallish side. Those big vessels really fill it up. It's not a good habitat for them, but that doesn't slow them down. They go where they want. One of the things that people commonly don't know here in this area, I mean, I went out yesterday in my little smart car, the 2007 diesel smart car that gets almost 70 miles to the gallon, and I filled up my diesel, and I paid $2.28 a liter for diesel, which is pretty well a record for me. One of the things that people don't know about these large yachts is if they're over a certain tonnage, they are often registered in foreign jurisdictions, and as such they are exempt from paying any local sales tax or carbon tax, meaning that you could have a 100-foot yacht burning 3,000 liters an hour of diesel fuel, and in an absolute sense they pay less carbon tax than I do in my tiny little diesel smart car. There's more to that. Interestingly enough, here a couple of years ago, I got roped into building a small powerboat for one of these characters. I can leave that name unspoken because it's a name that would be recognized here in Canada. Often I kind of Google these people when I encounter them, and if they prove themselves to be the kind of asshat that I expect, I often decline the opportunity. But in this case, I got involved, and about 3/4 of the way through the project, I was feeling kind of regretful about commingling myself with that. Anyway, about a $350,000 dinghy for his big yacht. Okay, interestingly enough, because it's a dinghy for his big yacht, he doesn't have to pay any sales tax on it because it goes through the title of the larger yacht. No sales tax, no licensing fees, no any of that, which would run to the tune of about 15% of the cost of the vessel. This guy doesn't pay any of that, right? If you were going to go out and buy a used sport boat, $25,000 POS, plastic, fantastic, you are going to, in an absolute sense, pay radically more than this guy pays. Obviously, one can take a look at this and you can recognize that there are and exist a class of characters out there who, in fact, operate as a certain kind of royalty, where the rules that apply to the plebeians like you and I do not apply to them, nor to the costs, nor to the consequences. And it's pretty conspicuous. Like, there isn't a big effort made in attempting to hide that. In fact, in a lot of ways, it gets flaunted in front of us, like royalty of the days of yore had a tendency to do. There's a question about how it is that you deal with that. I was asked here on a forum not that long ago, because I was talking about my piratey kind of stuff, and the term privateering, as I kind of interpret that as a strategy for the modern individual who finds themselves beset in these oppressive structures like you might have seen in the 16, 17, 1800s. Well, there's things to be learned there. Primarily that the system is rigged. It is rigged for some people. It is rigged radically against your interests. And if you are going to be successful in it, you need to adopt a posture of being an independent, sovereign operator with the most light and fleeting of obligations and connections with the larger structure, to try to hope that there's going to be some kind of future for you within the hierarchical structure of the society that you live in. No, that's a fool's errand. You know that. And you reject that from the start, and you make that an operant first principle, really. Now, of course, this is just one example of many. When you start to look at the kinds of examples, perhaps the career path, chortle, of somebody like Hunter Biden, who apparently has like more outstanding unpaid taxes than I actually make in income, but there doesn't seem to be any consequences to that. Or perhaps, your Chelsea Clinton sorts who literally marry into mobster families conspicuously right out in the open, and like that doesn't seem to make anybody bat an eye. You have to, if you have an objective mind, wonder why it is that the large number of the population, regardless of the ideological divide that they might find themselves hypothetically on, I mean, again, that I believe that's mostly a construct, why it is that there is not more outrage towards the glaring and conspicuous corruption and nepotism. And there's an answer philosophically from the era of privateering, and that stems from much the idea, I forget who made the expression here in the U.S., that most people say in the United States view themselves as potential royalty, or as at least temporarily embarrassed millionaires, meaning that the average person, when they see the privilege of the guy that gets to cheat on his taxes or gets the plush job as a no-talent peddling influence, they're not offended by that because they want to have the privilege of emulating that. And that's dangerous because it shows you that if you are the kind of individual who actually wants to, in a forthright manner, earn a honorable living by the efforts of your own hands, you are beset not only by the royalty class, but by their lackeys, and by not just the lackeys, but the lowest of the low, who are not functional and able to contribute to society whatsoever. So that the functional guy in the middle is beset by the royalty, it's by the servants of the royalty, the aspiring royalty. None of these people have any character or ethical compass, and they are squeezed between these individuals and the poorest of the poor, who are simply making their way in whatever they can. The honest, honorable, quote-unquote middle-class tradesman is really on his own. And that is going to become tremendously more conspicuous here as we move into the collapse bottleneck. And you should grow increasingly more suspicious of this mechanism as we go forward. If you are one of those unique individuals who's a first-order producer of value rather than somebody who sponges and extorts, you should recognize that there's a great big round target painted on your back, and having some strategy by which that target is obscured to individuals who might be interested in harvesting your value is probably prudent. But it is interesting at this moment, with the reach and prevalence of engineered media, how the term success, which is largely manufactured as a construct from the privileged class, from individuals who have not been successful, just privileged, how they set the definition by which you must actually live your life, what success means for you, for them. I would encourage you questioning all of that, questioning where your alliances lie, what success actually means for you, rather than in the context of larger society, which is again, precisely rigged to keep you from succeeding rather than being there as something to aid you or provide a mechanism for you for success. And in reality, that shouldn't surprise you, because the first thing that an individual who earns an honest living, who works their butt off as a first order producer of value, would do if they were successful would be to quit. And that does not serve your master's interest. Your master has an interest in you not succeeding, just believing as long as possible, as close to the grave as you can go, that you might. And this is why there has always been very, very cushy opportunities for certain kinds of gurus and apologists for the status quo that give you 10 steps for life and to make your bed and get up, bucko, and all that kind of horseshit. The reason that they find themselves so financially rewarded for such terrible advice is because it serves the interests of hierarchical authority. If you were sincere about elevating the sovereign individual, male or female, to be the fullest and most empowered version of themselves, independence and autonomy must be central to that. And to achieve independence and autonomy, one must fundamentally question the relationship with larger social structures, with hierarchical authority, with what that means, with what that begets, and to decide how much, if at all, one holds Congress with it. I mean, you do have to question these absolutely nearly sacred assumptions, unsupported assumptions that come from society, that your culture somehow is a supporter of freedom, of opportunity, of all of that kind of jingoisty garbage, right? If you don't feel that it is, you are the final arbiter of whether or not your society provides it for you. There is enough individuality between individuals that the society that you live in, even if it happened to be, the promised land for most people, might be something that in fact is incredibly constraining for your own creativity. You do need to be able to question that, and you do need to have the permission to operate, again, as an independent actor, seeking a life that serves you and your values, because in fact, that is the purpose of human life. And again, it's my maxim, the purpose of life is to live a life of purpose. Purpose is found in connection. You've got to have the developed personhood, autonomy, independence. You've got to be able to have the permission either afforded to you by your own engineering. Hopefully it would be provided to you by the society that you live in, but if not, if your society is there, in fact, to restrict that rather than support it, then you will need to adopt the attitude of the privateer and carve it out for yourself if you hope to, in any way, form, or fashion, reach towards these higher order expressions of humanity and relating, again, which I fundamentally believe is the reason that we make the choice to continue breathing. So something there to really think about. I believe that we have a culture and a society that is highly oppressive. Our civilization is based largely on exploitation of the commons and the unfortunate individuals that live there. At some level, we all do know that. It certainly serves some people at the top very well. A lot of people it doesn't serve very well at all. If you are an honest, forthright person of good moral character who has their eyes turned outward with the intent to relate to other, it becomes conspicuous very quickly, and it's something that is uncomfortable at least and abhorrent at worst. At worst. And you will need to find some mechanism by which you can find for yourself the sovereignty and independence by which to navigate that. That is, if you want to have anything resembling success, at least on the terms that find themselves to be satisfying for you, well, let that Jolly Roger fly. Cheers, peeps.